Yo, what's up guys? In this video we are going to be talking about the domain and range of a function. So what is essentially the domain of a function? And domain is basically all of the possible values of the input of a function that you could have. So a domain is basically all input values, all input values of a function. And the range is all of the output, all of the output values of a function. What do I mean by this? Let me just draw a graph over here to explain my idea. This is x. This is the y-axis, and let's say my function is f of x equals x squared. So this is a function, it's a quadratic function of x squared, and the graph of this is basically going to be something like this. Now, of course, this graph is going to be extended over here. It's going to go all the way up and up and up and all the way up and up and up over here. But since we have a small graph over here, we can't really see what's going on outside of this region. So let's talk about what are the possible x values of this. What are the possible x values of this graph? So see, if this is x equals 0 at the origin, then you can have any value, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. You could have any value, any positive x value. In the same way, you can have any negative x value, -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on. Okay, and don't be thinking that, oh, if you have some value, let's say -100 over here, that it's not going to have a corresponding y value just because your graph is all the way till this mark. That's not the reason is, the thing is, we have a tiny graph. This curve would be extending all the way over there as well. We just can't see it in our tiny graph. So this -100 will have some value that's going to correspond over here to it as well. We just can't see it in this case. So you can have any positive x value, any negative x value. We don't see a restriction over here. So the domain is basically the set of all the possible input values that you can have. In this case, you can have any x value from -infinity all the way to positive infinity, right? So you can have any number between these two values. You can have pi, you can have 1 by 2, 1,000, 1 billion, 3 million, 2 by 5, anything that you can imagine you can have between these two values. So in other words, basically all possible numbers are the domain of this function, f of x equals x squared. Now let's talk about what is the range for this function. And if you look at this function, it's made in a way that, let's say, you can have your y equals 1 over here, y equals 2, y equals 3, 4, and so on, all the way till you go to positive infinity, because this curve is going to keep on going and going and going all the way to positive infinity. So the range is basically, you can have this is the smallest possible value that you can have. Okay, you start at y equals 0, and then you can go all the way up till positive infinity. So your range basically goes from 0 all the way to positive infinity. And this time it's only 0, 0, and positive numbers. So you cannot have a negative value in your as your y value. You cannot have a negative number as your output value. And that's just because of how the quadratic function works, how f of x equals x squared works, okay? So in your domain, you can basically put in any positive, you can put in any positive or any negative x input. You can put in any input value you want. But when you will get an output, when you will get that range, that output values, you will only get those output values to be 0 or positive numbers. You will never get a negative output. And that's just because of how the x squared graph works. So let me just take another graph for perspective over here. And I'm just going to draw, hold on. We are going to draw our axes, y and x. And this time I'm going to take the graph of y equals x. Or I can say this is g of x equals x. Now this graph is going to look something like this. It's going to pass straight through the origin again, and it's going to keep on going like this. Now in this case, see, your x could be anything, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to positive infinity, and then -1, -2, -3, all the way to negative infinity. So the domain can basically be negative infinity all the way to positive infinity, but your range can this time go from your range can this time, I'm trying to change the pen. Okay, it's not working, but your range, see, this is could be +1, +2, +3, and as this keeps on going up and up and up, you can go all the way to positive infinity. And in the same way, as this other part keeps on going down and down and down, you can go all the way to negative infinity. So in this case, your range also goes from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. So if for these input values, it is possible that you may get a negative or you may get a positive value. So the domain, and this is what a domain and range is. You can basically have any any input value, and if it's within these two values, it's basically part of the domain. In the same way, if you have any output value that is between negative infinity and positive infinity, then that's basically going to be a part of your range. Now you can also something cool that you can do with your function is you can also define your own domain. So if I just take the graph of let's say f of x equals x squared again, and what I do is I say that the domain is only x is greater than or equal to 0, then what I've basically done is see if this was the graph of x squared, then now I've basically turned it into this thing. I basically just turned it into this thing, because I said that my domain has to be 0 or greater than 0. So if this is the origin, this is where 0 is at, then I can only have this point or anything that is greater than this point. All of this is going to be rejected because it's not part of my domain. This is where x is a negative number. This could be -1, this could be -2. So I have rejected all of that part. And that is something that you could do with the function. You can define your own domain. If you make your own function, you can define your own domain. So in my function, this f of x equals x squared, in my function with this defined domain, my graph will only look like this. And then if I've already defined my domain to be x is greater than or equal to 0, what is going to be my range? Let's check that out. You'll see my lowest possible value of y is over here at the origin, and it's just 0. And then as this curve keeps on going up and up and up, the maximum possible y value I can have is positive infinity. So my range is going from 0 all the way, so y could be 0 or anything up till positive infinity. So I could have, let's say, my y could be 10, my y could be 100, my y could be 2, my y could be a billion, my y could be anything, but it cannot be a negative number.